Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everybody. I welcome you all to today's webinar. As you all know, today marks the 45th death anniversary of the father of our nation. With a heavy heart, we continue to strive to achieve a nation that he so valiantly fought for and liberated. I'm Azwane, and again, I welcome you to today's discussion session on early childhood development. Many parents are struggling to not only keep their children occupied, but also to oversee schooling during this time and have gained a new appreciation for the value of teachers. Homeschooling shows how complex and demanding a teacher's work can be. And on the other hand, with the sudden switch to remote learning, teachers are struggling with many challenges. And in their efforts to meet the development needs of their students, while also, juggling homeschooling and caring for their own families. So to support the teachers, mainly the teachers, and also the parents to overcome the challenges of teaching at home and teaching online, we at Aloki to Teachers have been relentlessly designing and providing workshops, online workshops, conducting discussion sessions with experts, and hope to continue to do so in the future. In today's discussion session, we have with us two esteemed panelists, Ms. Minnat Khan and Ms. Lucy Drury. Ms. Minnat Khan has been teaching children from 3 to 6 years old for the last 28 years. She is qualified in the Montessori method from London Montessori Center, UK, and has worked as nursery teacher at Jeddah Preparatory and Grammar School in Saudi Arabia. Since 2013, she's been teaching pre-K and kindergarten at ISD, International School, Dhaka. Miss Lucy, who is an Australian pre-kindergarten teacher at International School, Dhaka, is a play advocate. She has 3 children of her own under the age of 7, and interacting with them and managing them have helped her learn more about play-based learning, and this has really influenced her great curiosity and love for early childhood development. So thanks to the esteemed panelists for joining us today. Ms. Minnat and Ms. Lucy will be sharing a presentation on early childhood development. While they're presenting, the participants are most welcome to put your questions in the Q&A box. At the end of the presentation, I will be relaying your questions to the panelists. And with that, with the Q&A round, we will be ending our discussions. So I'm already wary of time. And without further ado, I will request Ms. Minnat to begin her presentation. Thank you. Over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Azwa, and thank you to Alokito Ridoy for inviting us this morning. So the first thing I'm going to do, Lucy, could we have the next slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just the first.
Yeah. So just to say what we'll be doing, what our presentation is going to be about, the aims and objectives. So the first thing is going to be that our understanding, the adults' understanding of how children learn, the importance of play for early childhood learners, play experiences, what they can look like, the importance of spoken language, literacy through play, mathematics through play, and how we as adults can support the children. And the objective is to help develop a balanced child, a child who's curious to learn, a child who's a thinker, who thinks about what they're doing and applies what they've learned to other things. They're reflective, that they are effective communicators. They can express themselves, ask for help, ask questions. They are independent and confident to try new experiences, and socially caring and principled, knowing to do the right thing. Thank you, Lucy. Next one. So how children learn. The first important point if we could just get that point on. Tap. The most important way in which children learn is through personal interest. If they're interested in something, they will want to learn about it, and they can remain engaged. They are driven by personal interest. Thank you. Next one. Hands-on experience. Children, let them do things with their own hands, and things as simple as dressing themselves or putting on their shoes, or just, they are much better at doing things than listening and watching you. That's not going to sit in their brains. But the more they handle it, the more they will learn. And the next point is not coming on. Multisensory. So that kind of leads on to hands-on experience is directly linked to their sensorial ability to learn. Touching, smelling, and as we've all seen, young children putting things in their mouth. They're not simply tasting it. It's a way they make sense of whatever they're handling. So multi-sensory experiences for them is a direct connection to the brain. And play. They learn through play. So all of this handling, touching, putting things in their mouth, listening, smelling, all of this is actually getting the children making sense of their world. This is them learning. And this image, I'll let you read it. Actually, I'll read it out. Learning can only happen when a child is interested. If he is not interested, it's like throwing marshmallows at his head and calling it eating. Couldn't have said it better. So if they're not interested and you just sit them down and start saying things to them or making them do it, it's worthless. It's a waste of your time, and more importantly, it's a waste of their time. Stop. Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, so, sorry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why play-based learning is what we consider one of the more successful and beneficial forms of educating and developing lifelong learners in early childhood. Research into play-based learning has shown that play has a profound impact on the holistic development of a child. It helps develop their emotional, their social, their language, their cognitive, and physical development. Learning through play is really appealing to children because it allows them to explore their natural curiosities and desires and to engage in experiences based on their interests and strengths. But it also develops skills that make sense, that help them make sense of the world around them. Students who are allowed to play are shown to have an increased impressive higher order thinking skills, such as problem solving and critical thinking, because they're given opportunities to do this in their play. And they also have a higher proficiency in literacy and numeracy because of their authentic play experiences. Children who are encouraged to play are provided opportunities for a variety of play experiences. And this develops a child who is a thinking child and who's more motivated to learn and who has a positive experience around learning. Here's another one of our little quotes that we thought was very apropos to what we're talking about today, being that play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of childhood. And yeah, we couldn't have really said it better. Because when children are playing, they're hard at work building relationships, making sense of their worlds, and practicing important language skills and learning important foundational math and literacy skills all at the same time.
oh, sorry. What is play-based learning? Play-based learning is simply allowing children large chunks of time to play and to engage in authentic play experiences. And when I say that, I mean where they're really allowed to explore their environment. The play is their learning, it's their work. If a teacher successfully sets up an environment for students, the learning is going to happen through their play just naturally, because it's the way children do learn. It's going to promote a variety of engaging play experiences. And then as a teacher, you can really watch them interact with their environment and one another and document their learning, because you'll see it happening all around you. We are passive observers and facilitators of their learning, but in a very intentional way. If a child's presented with and active in these authentic learning experiences, they develop a range of skills by just engaging in their play. Through their conversations, they're building language skills, specifically their vocabulary and listening, and sometimes practicing formal and informal language depending on the context. For example, if they were playing in like a grocery store scenario, one might be the shopkeeper and one might be the customer. And in just like in a real life situation, you're kind of using more formal language with strangers. But then when they're discussing the play as peers, it's rather informal language. They're developing social skills by sharing and negotiating and cooperating. And this is often observed in dramatic play and role play. Another great aspect of these centers is you can really beautifully incorporate math by having cash registers and calculators and play money. They're naturally exploring concepts of mathematics, of number and addition and currency. Leaving writing materials around allows them to practice their symbolic literacy skills, writing shopping lists and menus and receipts and shop signs with whatever emergent literacy skills they've got at that age. The construction corner is a really popular corner in my classroom, where they're creating patterns, problem solving, exploring scientific concepts of cause and effect, building fine motor skills. All of these opportunities are ways for us teachers as well to access the students' learning through their conversations, their choices, their actions, their vocabulary. It's insight into how they're thinking and their processes. It's a little insight into their world. A lot of these can be recreated at home. I've put up some examples there about sensory play and construction play. A lot of these are in the classroom, but they can be recreated at home really easily by making Play-Doh, mixing noodles, cooked noodles or rice or lentils, and they can be mixed up, so it doesn't have to be something new every week. It could be Play-Doh and then you could add some beads into the Play-Doh, so the kids have to get the beads out. Washing toys, freezing animals into ice trays and then watching them melt the ice and releasing the toys with droppers of warm water or salt. My kids love that game. And so for me, I plan on assigning one of these kind of activities weekly for my students, and so the parents can engage in them as they would like. Anything else on that, Ms. Minath, that you would like to add?
So yeah, I was just going to say that all of that, as if we could just go back to the previous slide, if it's possible, please. So so there's the sensory play, which is all the things that Lucy just talked about, the ice, the Play-Doh, because apart from the fine motor, it's the different senses, and these have a direct message to the brain. Role play is a great insight into what they've observed around the world. Construction is almost like the beginnings of design technology. And so, yeah, it kind of, all the different areas of growth it is catered for. Thank you.
Sure. And then I'm going to talk a little bit now about virtual learning, because we're not in our classrooms at the moment, and that can present some challenges for sure. It's not an ideal way to teach early years. However, it's the card we have at the moment. So one of the really important things, I'm not going to talk about all of these, so if there's something that's not clear, please let me know. But some of the really important aspects of these online classes and online sessions that we're running is to set norms and expectations with both your students and your families. Being really clear and open with families, talking about schedules and routines, frequency of how often you're going to post, turnaround time on submissions and feedback, and of course, ways that they can communicate with you. Establishing a routine. Kids love and need routine, and particularly now more than ever when everything's kind of a bit up in the air. So when they log on to their live sessions, them having a little bit of an idea of knowing what's going to happen. And if you can kind of mimic what you do in your classroom, even if they're new students, it's a really safe space for them and it builds trust. So one of my live sessions might start with a welcome song, and then we might do calendar followed by a quick game, gets them up and maybe moving, and then finish with reading a book. But it's also good to keep them short and break into chunks. A kid's attention span is about the same as their age. So a 5-year-old's attention span is about 5 minutes. So breaking it into about chunks of 5 minutes. And I would say no longer for early years than 20 to 30 minutes max. So keep it fun and also flexible. So if you notice that your kids are just kind of bouncing off the walls that day, maybe drop the book and assign an online book that they could listen to a bit later on when they're a bit more settled. Because also it's a really great time for socialization that they're really kind of missing at school right now. So allowing them to chat. And we found that breaking our classes into small groups of 3 or 4 really allowed them to do that. It allowed them to engage with one another in a really kind of direct way without too much overtalk and distraction. And then mixing those groups so that they saw everyone in the class now and then. So they weren't constantly seeing the same 3 or 4 people. That made it really fun for them to see all of their classmates. Another great way to keep these activities interesting and to be able to accommodate all students is to keep activities open-ended so that students have agency in their learning, their voices are heard, and they're given choice to express themselves how they see best. If activities are too stringent, all we're really seeing is that kids can follow directions, but what we really want to see is they're understanding their thoughts, they're learning their thought processes. And it helps them to develop, again, those higher level thinking skills such as problem solving and decision making. It also allows for differentiation. Kids learn in all these different kinds of ways. So if one kid, if you would like feedback on, or sorry, a kid's favorite part of a story that you read together, one child might prefer to share that verbally, another might like to act it out, and another might prefer to draw it. And all of those are completely valid and wonderful ways for them to express themselves to you. So keeping activities open-ended for students is a great way to allow for students to engage in the lessons how they feel most comfortable. Anything else on that, Ms. Minette?
I think you pretty much hit everything. Thank you.
Okay. Nope.
Okay, so one of the most important things as adults in a young learner's life is to promote oral language, spoken language. So, you know, children start speaking at different times in their life. So it's our job to get that, engage that, to bring it out. So as an adult, to ask provocative questions, something that requires more than a yes/no answer. And then to listen actively. So nod your head, follow so that they know that you are listening to what they're saying. And then maybe asking more questions so that it keeps them talking. Not a good time to start correcting their syntax or anything. Just let them talk. Because what we're trying to do is really, we're trying to find out what their worldview is, why they're thinking certain things. Certainly to ask them to think. Eventually we want to get into maybe asking them to ask questions. So with all your questioning, hopefully they will learn to ask some questions as well. giving and following instructions is also an interesting way, you know, to build that conversation and just how well they understand what you're saying. We all learn new languages through songs and rhymes, even as adults. I may not know a certain language, but if I like the song, I may actually learn the words and eventually try to understand the words of the song. The same is true for children. Language learning is done in exactly the same steps for adults as they are for children. The children may take a bit longer because they have no previous language to fall back on. So sing along, and then following the beat of the song, and eventually pointing out rhyming words in a song. All of this promotes oral language, and these are extremely valuable learning experiences. And the last one, at this stage, as early as possible, even when babies are a week old, I would say, it is a great time to start fostering the love of reading. Sadly, more and more we're seeing reading being associated with study, and nothing is less motivating. Reading should be a joyful experience. Share books with children. Reading looks very different for early years. Looking at a picture and talking about the picture is vital. So sharing picture books where there are no words and you're just talking about what you see in the picture, what you think is going to happen. Those discussions are really essential. Reading aloud to children. Now, I would say choose that book carefully. Any book that's got too many words on a page for a young listener is going to be a little boring. Bear in mind that their attention span is short. So not too many words, move along, but read aloud with them. They love revisiting books. So a favorite book, yes, pull it out as many times. Shared reading, that read aloud book with a few words could become a shared reading book because by now they'll know what to say on a certain page. Ask questions like, oh, what do you think is going to happen on the next page? What makes you think that? Ask them, oh, you know, what questioning? It would be more like predicting as well. It could be more like predicting. It could also be, what's your favorite part of the book? Just to remember, this is not a time when we should be testing the child. Show me the word the, show me the word and. No. If you want them to love reading, please make it a very enjoyable, equal opportunity session, because that way they will engage with books with joy and pleasure. Thank you. Lucy, what would you add to that with your?
Just that with when they're very little, it's asking them just to point to the butterfly, or what do you see on the page, and maybe if they've got some language skills, they can name the dog or a color or a shape. And then the older they are, where you're talking 5-6 year olds, maybe you're getting into what do you think might happen next, and what do you think they're feeling, emotional responses and things like that. But also, as Miss Minat said at the very beginning in the conversation section about asking questions, modeling asking questions is also really necessary for little kids to kind of see that activity happening. And in books, that's a really great way to be able to do that, because responses aren't even required, but they're seeing you model asking questions, which is really important for them to be able to learn how to do that themselves.
So developing literacy is moving on, which is you're starting to get into the nuts and bolts of reading and writing. the first thing we need to do is develop phonological awareness, which is really, I don't know what the everyday language for that is. It's a bit jargony, but basically this is mostly about speaking and listening work. And it's crucial to the foundations of eventually getting, you know, the introductions to reading and writing, as I said before. Could I have the first point, please? So we start with something like name study, going back to personal interest. Nothing interests a child more than their own name. So we use that. So we use this as the hook to phonological awareness. Now, what is phonological awareness? Something, next point, please, would be syllables. How many syllables in your name? So to clap it out, to count the beats, because there is a beat in the word, and just making them aware of that. You can stamp it out, clap it out, count the beats. Then looking for the beginning sounds of their name. What does your name begin with? What sound do you hear? I'm not asking for the letter name. I'm not, you know, what does Minnat begin with? I'm not expecting them to say M, but to say because that's what they hear at the beginning. And then maybe going around saying, what else begins with You know, maybe mango or milkshake. Then to go into the work of rhyme, just to see if their name offers a rhyming opportunity. Don't force it. If a natural opportunity comes up, then make them aware of it. And that builds fun with language. It's mostly to do with listening. Once you've done that, once you've got phonological awareness, these kind of syllable, rhyme, beginning sound work going, and you're aware of it, then you can start talking about more formal, like phonics. In phonics, we want to really focus on the sounds that letters produce. So not A, but A, not B, but B, just because we want them to recognize those sounds. And often the letter names just confuse them, whereas the sounds will actually help them, they can put it to work. Then presenting those letters, more a child will see his own name written or her own name written, and you can give them the sounds that each of those letters produce in their name. Yep. And then they can look for things that begin with each of those letters. So it's almost like a mind map. So here's your name, and this begins with this. It doesn't have to be something you draw, but you can get physical things to say, all these things that begin with your name. Okay? And I know everybody wants to get into the business of writing, but writing using a pen and paper, to me, seems something that you should be doing further down the line. What you could start with is drawing on sand or drawing on salt. It's amazing things around your house. A tray of rice, uncooked rice, is tactile, it's sensorial, and they can write on it and shake it out, and it's a lot more fun. A tray of shaving foam. Different ways to write. But yes, by all means, provide them with writing tools like pens, chalks, and let them have a go. And yes, I would say if you're going to, they should be introduced. If they're showing an interest in this kind of writing, then certainly letter formation. And while doing letter formation, I would urge adults to stick to lowercase instead of capital letters, because lowercase is what we use mostly in our writing, and it eventually leads naturally into cursive writing when they're in their as they grow older, and they don't have to relearn, because you can't do cursive with capital letters. Thank you. Anything else, Lucy?
No, you've covered all of that. I would say all of this is a build up through the early years,
Yeah.
grade levels. The 3-year-olds are playing with sand, lots of sensory stuff, recognizing their name when it's written, where they put their bag away, recognizing which one's their name, and then it builds up. But none of this would be spelling, or there's none of that in early years. That's for much later on. But yes. Oops, sorry.
So now moving on to practical number experience. Continuing on with the importance of oral language, it's also important to build the language of mathematics. Comparative language, more than, less than, how many are there, how many do you think? All of this is mathematical language. Even mathematics needs language. You can write numbers, but you have to, in order to explain it, you need words and language. So build that, recognize that. Thank you. The next thing is counting forward in a sequence. So yes, of course children need to be able to do that, but there are fun ways of doing it. I find a lot of children are just told, stand there and say your numbers up to 100. That's what happens. The danger in that is it becomes rote learning and the brain is not engaged. So when you ask the child, what comes after 5, they have to start from 1, which means they actually don't know what comes after 5. So better ways to do that is to learn to count in maybe partnerships. So I say 1, you say 2, I say 3, you say 4. That keeps them thinking on what comes next. Yeah, you can do it in a group. If you've got 4 children, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, and so they have to keep their thinking on what I will need to say. One-to-one correspondence is also something that we work on and try to get them to really learn at an early stage, which means you've got a little set of objects and they're not counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It means 1, 2, 3. So one object, one number, and to say it one at a time. One-to-one correspondence is vital in them representing a set of numbers. So they've collected a few things. How many have you got? They can count that out. If I say to them, can you count me out 3 things? They can actually count it out and give it to you, keeping that one-to-one. This comes with experience. They're not just going to be able to do it, but the more they do it, the better they'll get at it. Maybe teaching them to move things over as they count will help. One of the things that helps them is a 10 frame. Lucy, could you move your cursor over to the 10 frame, please? So that they can see it. The one on the floor. Yeah, so we use this a lot in early years. You can tape it on the floor or have a little drawing of it, but it helps them to see. First you do the 10 frame and the children count how many squares there are, and then they put one thing in each square, and this actually helps promote one-to-one correspondence. Number recognition, of course they're going to need to see that. So you can use a number line to help them recognize numbers. And as you count, as you see in that first picture, there's a tape with the numbers on it and a peg that's matching it. And so this number line is vital because it shows them how numbers progress. You might even build a live number line where you have one object and the number 1, 2 objects and the number 2, but that as the child grows older. Thank you. So practical Data handling is also a great way to develop number sense. Little things like, what's your question? You want to find out about what's your favorite color? And the younger the child, they might just have, or maybe even how many boys and girls are in school today. They love doing that. So that's so many boys, so many girls, and then color in the number of boxes of boys, color in the number of girls, and then compare. Are there more boys or more girls in school today? This promotes counting. Collecting information, asking the question, what do you want to find out and what are your options? Recording and gaining information, which is just what we talked about earlier. Learning to use graphs and tally marks. Children love this. Data handling is one of, a hot favorite in my classroom. Lucy?
Next slide.
Yes, if you have anything to add to this.
I think you did a great job.
Okay. So the other aspect of math, number is a huge part and ongoing. But you can offer different mathematical experiences like measuring length or measuring weight or measuring capacity or time. Now, remember that we are building language. They need to, and we're building the conceptual understanding. So in measuring length, if you can see in that first picture, that little girl is lying down and they've cut out some hands and they're using hands to see how long she is, how tall she is. Well, she's lying down, so how long she is. In the same way, you can make a very simple little weighing scale using a hanger and 2 cups. And you're just literally talking about which one's heavier and which one's lighter and what's the same. And when it's the same, it balances. In measuring capacity, your capacity is a word that they probably won't understand. So you need to say things like, well, how much does it hold? And really at this stage, you want to show them what a cup looks like when it's full, when it's empty, and when it's half full or empty. And they can do this with water, with sand, with rice, anything. And measuring time. By measuring time, try not to, resist the temptation to go straight into the clock. But it's literally day, night. What do we do during the day? What do we do at night? The sequence of your day, you get up in the morning, which one do you do before, which one do you do after? So all of this is time language. Looking for patterns, identifying patterns. Day, night is an obvious pattern in our daily life. Finding other patterns. They could be on their clothes. It could be a sound pattern. It could be a shape pattern. Just drawing their attention to it. So identifying patterns is one. Being able to continue a pattern, like this little girl is doing. She's making patterns with blocks. And creating their own patterns. So the essential understanding would be that patterns repeat themselves and that they help us to know what comes next. Thank you, Lucy. There'll be one more, I think. Or is that it? Maybe it's it. Yeah, shape and space. So looking for...
No, it's there.
Yeah. So shape and space, flat shapes, 2D shapes. They try to keep it child-friendly. So flat shapes and fact shapes, which are the 3D shapes. And they're all around us. So just giving them this is also a lot of their symbolic representation. So if they will make a square and put a circle on it, put 2 sticks on it, and it's a person. drawing their attention to that, giving them the names of some of the fact shapes, the 3D shapes, and maybe, oh, look, I can see a flat, like a cylinder will have a circle on the top and a circle at the bottom, to talk about how things roll and how things are curved, what a corner is, all of this language. And this is also the introduction to maps. Maps for young children look very different from maps. So we're not just giving them the option to maybe draw a map of their house or map of their room. Is a great opportunity for map language. Thank you. Move on to the next one.
Just to jump in,
Yeah.
we're really enjoying the presentation so far, but just to be cognizant of the time, we have 15 minutes left. And just very quickly, we're getting a lot of questions about moving all of this online. Just for the participants, we have one entire slide on that. So instead of, preventing the panelists from going forward, I'll just hand it back to you.
Actually, there's only one more slide, and we can actually skip that. It's
no, I'm not for you to go over that. I'm just
okay.
just a quick reminder.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. We've lost Lucy.
All right, no worries. If you just give me a moment, I think I can share the slide with.
Actually, these are a few tips and tricks that I was talking about. Things to remember: that a child's attention span is roughly equivalent to their age in minutes. Lucy mentioned that earlier. So a 5-year-old roughly has the attention span of 5 minutes. So even if you're meeting with them for 15 minutes, you'd have 3 things to do with them. Allow children time to process your request. So when you tell them to do something, please allow them time. Your saying it means for a young child has to process it before they do it. If you want them to do things independently, please alert them. So if there's a transition coming, or they don't like Aswa just did, she alerted me about the time. As an adult, I can respond to that faster, but young children need time. So I always say 10 minutes. So we have 10 more minutes, start thinking about tidying up, and 5 more minutes, and now it's time. And then I do a countdown, 10, 9, 8. And so that helps them to get ready instead of brutally cutting down their playtime. When you offer help, please don't do the job for them. That's not independent. Show them how, assist them, but don't do it for them. When you are making requests, keep your language short, simple, clear. Don't make it too wordy. It's confusing for them. Frame your statements positively. So instead of saying, don't run, you could say, please walk. Or you could say, thank you for tidying up, which is code for it's time to tidying, it's time to start tidying. When a child is giving you an answer which is not conventional, best not to say, no, that's not true. Best to say, oh, really, what makes you think that? Because then you'll know that allows them the opportunity to give you their reasoning. And facilitating conflict resolution, which is almost actually another session, so stay back from that now. On the second column, I just want to tell you that early years teachers collect everything. Other people's rubbish is our treasure. Magazines of food and faces, calendars, these are essential stock in any early years classroom. Large cartons will make for role play. Tissue boxes, empty tissue boxes, making glue with flour and water, newspaper, essential for doing all kinds of activities and cutting. Cardboard tubes, the ones that come in the kitchen rolls. or tin foil or whatever, bottle caps, buttons, those beautiful invitation cards from weddings. They're awesome for constructing stuff. And scraps of fabric. These make really beautiful collage. And if you just have that around in the room, they'll do all kinds of stuff with it. Yep, that's it.
All right, I'll just stop sharing my screen so that Miss Lucy can take it on from here.
We can put that last slide if you would like to go to questions. They're short on time.
I think
is that
so,
better?
Sorry, I didn't get that. You were breaking up.
Should we skip that and the questions?
Sure. Because we have a couple of questions here.
Yep.
A lot of the questions are around how do we make the virtual learning space a more interactive learning space? Now that, because we've heard a beautiful presentation about engaging students and making learning fun. It's about how to pique their interest, and one of the more popular, more tried and tested ways is play-based learning. And then we moved on to reading and mathematics, and the language that you use in mathematics is a more fascinating one to me, as I've already said before. And we tried to see how learning and how even when it comes to language, reading, writing, how that can be more engaging with open-ended questions and so on. But, you know, as the teachers grapple with this online learning space, the more of the questions are around how do we bring all of those elements in the online classroom? How do we make online learning really fun and engaging? So yeah, we'll start with that one.
Is Lucy here? No?
Yes, Lucy is here. Can you hear us?
I can now.
Yes. So the question is, how do we make online virtual learning fun and engaging for the students, and how do we just keep them at it, because it's very difficult to hold on to their attention, as you've rightly mentioned, that it's the number of the minutes that they're able to give attention is equivalent to their age. So how do we do that?
Okay, so Lucy, can I just jump in a little bit? So as Lucy mentioned in that slide, I'm not sure if this slide is going to be shared with them. I was just going to say, don't keep, and Lucy's mentioned this, not to keep the sessions too long. And during the session, you might give, I think this was an activity Lucy did herself, for instance. You know, she talked about measure your dining table.
Yeah.
Right? So do you want to talk about that and say how you did that?
So it was when we were doing measuring using obviously non-standard units. So we're not talking about centimeters, meters, anything like that. They had to measure a family member one day, and then another day they had to measure their dining table. So we definitely chose objects and items and people that everyone had access to. But then we left it quite open-ended as well, what they used as the measuring tool. The one request we made was that it was a standardized tool. So there were coloring in pencils or markers or spoons or drinking straws, something that was all the same length that they had multiple of. And they measured their dining table, took a photo of it. Some parents chose to record the child doing the activity and counting as they went. So I do think definitely keeping the activities open-ended, it allows the child to create what they want out of the activity in a way. Some kids really enjoyed figuring out what they were going to use to measure it. And some kids, built Lego towers to measure their mum, for example. And that was really fun. I found that allowed it to be more engaging because the child could put into it and get out of it more than what we could just tell them if we kept it too confined to our directions.
One of the things I'd add to that is something called a small group time. I've used this in many of my sessions, and basically before the session, you need to send a message home to the parents saying that, please, can you come to today's live session with. The idea behind a small group session is that everybody has the same materials. So it could be as simple as a piece of paper, a pair of scissors, and glue, and maybe one marker or two. And so everybody in that live session, whether it's 2 people or 4, has the same thing. But you're not telling them what to do with it. Everybody's free to do whatever they want. Somebody can start cutting, somebody may be drawing, they'll glue, and then, oh, what have you done? Oh, I like your idea. Oh, I see, I think I'm going to try that. So it develops this question, answer, conversation, acknowledgement that I like what you've done and I would like to try it, but then mine will be created differently. And these are engaging, and it allows choice. It's open-ended. So I would say, small group sessions in that way are a good place to start.
That's great. The other question that we've received is, what kind of storybooks can be read to the playgroup students? And then what kind of activities after the story session can be done online? Can we also do like reading online, some of the reading sessions?
Yeah.
How are we to do that to make it more interactive?
Okay, so I actually sat with a book for very young children, Brown Bear, what do you see? And it's really a repetitive pattern. And be familiar with your book. And very few words, big picture. So Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. So it basically, red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. So there's as you can see, soon the children will see that they now have to say yellow duck, yellow duck. It may not happen in the first reading, but it will come. And then so you just read that
in the words.
Yes, there is a pattern in the words, and you will engage them in it. When you've finished, you might just include the children. And so you're on the last page, and I might say, I might say, oh, I see you. They have children, what do you see? I see Aswa looking at me. Aswa, what do you see? I see Lucy looking at me. And so, just engage them. It's just fun. And reading to children, yes, you can do it online. It's one of the things you can do very effectively online.
That's amazing. That's amazing. In a classroom, we often have 1 or 2 of those learners who are always disengaged, or who are thinking of something else. Maybe there's something in the back.
I'm guessing she's going to say something in the background, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's distracting them. This is a developmental thing. I think children, it's a developmental thing. It's hard for children to engage over a virtual platform. It's easier in person. And even in person, there is always a child who finds it hard to sit with the whole group and listen.
Yeah. That was actually another point that I was going to talk about with the virtual learning, making sure your space that you do choose to set up your teaching station in is quite plain and not distracting, because it can cause further distractions on what can already rather challenging platform to teach children of certain ages. It can be confusing for adults too. So keeping your setting that you choose to set up your computer in,
So
And
Hello.
asking the same of the students that they're setting families that they set up as for students.
So I have another question from Sabrina Islam. She asked that how to involve learners who barely participate in classroom activities, and when does with a push from teacher or not? Anything to help them out? How to involve learners who barely participate in classroom activities, and they don't do anything unless they get a push from the teacher.
I do see that. I know there's always a child who doesn't, won't engage. I think the work of relationship building has to be done there. So the teacher would have to take the time to build a relationship with that child, maybe engage them. They just have to get into that child's headspace and find out. There will be something that interests that child. If he wants mentions, to give an example of a child I had in my class who would come in tearful and very disengaged. And during the conversation, I heard that he goes on the weekend to his grandfather's house. So just my asking him on a Sunday morning, how was his visit to his grandfather's house? Did he meet his cousins? Was the beginning of our relationship. He felt like I had an insight into his world, and that was the hook. And so so if he made something in class, I would say, oh, do you want to take that for your grandfather? Do you think he'd like to see it? And so he felt that he had a purpose that linked up to his home life. So I think for that disengaged child, I would recommend to take the time to build a relationship, to know what interests the child. That's your gateway.
And that might be through the one-on-one sessions to begin with, and allowing them to bring their home into those sessions so you can understand better what's happening in the family, particularly right now when things are quite stressful. So understanding whether it is the child or maybe it's something at home. But fun little things, just like doing show and tell. So something they bring to the session might give you an insight into what they are interested in, or what's distracting them, or where their head's at. So that can also be a good activity to get a little bit more insight into the students.
All right, thank you. Sorry for the internet has really been acting up today. And that's truly evident, but thank you so much. I think we've almost covered as many questions as we could. And for the participants, we will be sharing the video clip just in case you want to go over some of the things. And with the permission of the panelists, we will also be sharing the slides that were shown today, so that you can come back and revisit some of the points discussed. Thank you all for joining today. I'm really wary of the time where we've reached the end of it, and I would love for you all to stay connected with Alokitu Teachers and Alokitu Hriday Foundation. And to do so, you can stay connected through our Facebook page. And thank you so much to the panelists for going over such important details and for breaking them down using amazing examples to make each of these points really alive and easy to practice for all of us. With that note, I would like to conclude today's session with something from the two of you before we go off.
I would just like to say that working with young learners is actually a huge privilege. You are working with people who are going to be living tomorrow's world. And this is a huge privilege. Getting an insight into how they think, be mindful of that. They are not empty vessels, and we are not the fonts of all knowledge. They know stuff. make it your business to find out what they know and work with that. That would be my 2 bits.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. And as a mother of 3 little kids, one who just wandered downstairs mid presentation to find me, it's amazing to watch them grow, and it happens so fast. It happens so fast how much they pick up. I mean, you watch them walk into your classroom at the start of the year, and by the end of the year, they're walking out a totally different little person. And it is a privilege to watch that and be a part of that progress, and to hopefully be creating these children who grow into people who love learning, and that they can take that on into their educational careers that they've got ahead of them. They've got long years of learning ahead of them, so hopefully setting them up for great success in that is a real privilege. Yeah.
And thank you for inviting us today as well. Alokito, everyone.
Thank you so much. And you all know that we are here. We do realize the kind of struggles that you are all facing as teachers, and we are here to support you in every which way that we can. Please share with us how we can be of more help. Please let us know what we can do to support you more in this process, and do stay with us. And on that note, I would end today's webinar. Thank you again for joining. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.